Right, so Israel's genocide case began today in The Hague with the testimony from South Africa today. Israel have their turn to defend themselves tomorrow. There should be no underestimating how big an event this is, how huge a court case like this is, making it all the more risible for so many of our media outlets today, from the BBC to Sky to CNN to ABC, are downplaying it, ignoring it even, so much so they haven't even opted to televise any of it. So it remains to be seen if they do that tomorrow when it is Israel's turn. Thankfully, the International Court of Justice were streaming it themselves, and Al Jazeera showed it as well in full, so people could get around that mainstream ignorance. It's also a huge case because this is The Hague, for heaven's sake. To even be taken to The Hague in this day and age, if there's no case to answer, things don't escalate to the international stage, do they? And if the mass media think they can just cover bits of what happens tomorrow and downplay the events of today, they are sorely mistaken. Because the team of lawyers South Africa assembled, who took turns in speaking on various aspects of the case in a 3-hour-long hearing, came prepared. Boy, did they come prepared. And when the opening statement came, claiming Israel had no defence against accusations of genocidal intent, and frankly Western media and Western politicians are on trial here too, because should South Africa prevail and the case they laid out was forensic and devastating in equal measure, it is going to reflect horribly back on them, especially here in the UK with the general election coming up. Who wants to vote for a genocide enabler? Right, so South Africa began the 2-day proceedings at the International Court of Justice at The Hague this morning. It will continue tomorrow when Israel have their say, mount their defence, whatever form it may take. Many of us expect it to be full of excuses, but if that is the case, following on from the judicial masterclass South Africa's representatives put on today, they will be in significant bother. 3 hours is a lot to condense into a not overly long video. I've focused on key moments as much as possible, the bits that stood out for me at any rate, and even then it's hard to whittle this down, because the testimonies given were as compelling and damning as they were horrifying to hear and see in the footage they used, though they went to great pains to avoid using the most graphic video clips that they could easily have used, because they want the facts to speak for themselves, not be lost amongst imagery which is too easily fixed upon and all people end up remembering. As I said a moment ago, there's a team of lawyers involved. They all took different aspects of what it takes to prove genocide in a court of law to discuss, but certain elements definitely stood out. And the first lawyer to speak, Adila Hassim, set out the genocidal acts Israel have committed. This is where South Africa decided to start at, get the atrocities out there, and it all built up from there. Hassim built her speech around the case of Israel breaching Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, bearing in mind the legal definition of genocide means to intend to destroy in whole or in part an ethnic or religious group, and which comprises 5 points, labelled A to E, which are killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures to prevent births, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. And she gave example after example after example of all of these points being met. An occupation of Gaza has been in place since 1967. Almost half of the population of Gaza are children, and they are being killed by Israeli forces from land, sea and air. All are at immediate risk of starvation and dehydration and disease as a result of the mass destruction, the lack of aid, and crucially the impossibility of distributing that aid as bombs still fall. All of this renders the right to life impossible. So in violation of Article 2A on killing members of the group, Hassim gave evidence on the mass killing of people in Gaza and used the words of UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. There was nowhere in Gaza to hide that was safe. 23,210 Palestinians have been officially killed in sustained attacks over the last 3 months, 70% of them women and children. A further 7,000 Palestinians are missing, presumed dead. People in Gaza have been subjected to relentless bombing, killed in homes, shelters, hospitals, schools, mosques, churches, and as they try to find food and water. They have been killed if they fail to evacuate, yet they have also been killed even when they have evacuated, and when they've been told to go, and even when they tried to flee along Israeli declared safe routes. Bodies are buried in mass graves, often unidentified. In the first 3 weeks, 6,000 bombs were deployed per week, and at least 200 times Israel had deployed 2,000-pound bombs in areas designated as safe. Israel have decimated the north of Gaza, including refugee camps, and the largest, most destructive bombs available have been dropped by fighter jets owned by one of the world's most well-resourced armies on a captive population. Israel have killed unprecedented numbers of civilians, with knowledge of how many lives each 2,000-pound bomb is capable of taking when they choose to deploy them on a given area. Multiple family members have been killed, multi-generational families wiped out, often all killed together. Grandparents, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, no one is spared, not even newborns. Child killings in Gaza have been so extensive, Gaza has been described as a graveyard for children. There is no humane justification in these acts. On Article 2b, the matter of causing bodily or mental harm on the people of Gaza, attacks have left 60,000 Palestinians wounded and maimed, the majority again women and children. Healthcare has all but collapsed. Children are arrested, blindfolded, stripped and taken to unknown locations. Therefore, the physical and mental suffering is undeniable. On Article 2c, Hassim said Israel were deliberately imposing conditions that did not sustain life, done in 4 ways. Displacement, forcing the displacement of about 85% of Gazans. There is nowhere safe for them to flee to. They will be killed or be at extreme risk of being killed, and many Gazans have been displaced multiple times as families are forced to move repeatedly. 1 million people on a forced move from North Gaza to South. Entire hospitals were required to evacuate, including babies in intensive care, and they were given 24 hours to do so. That order itself was genocidal. Immediate movement, no humanitarian assistance, fuel, water and food were cut off. It was calculated to bring about destruction of the population. Israel has now damaged or destroyed the homes of some 500,000 Gazans who now have nowhere to return to. Infrastructure has been razed to the ground. No indication that Israel accepts responsibility for rebuilding what they destroyed. Instead, they celebrate it. Soldiers celebrate it. They've been seen flying Israeli flags in the rubble. Hassim's second point here was that with forced displacement, designed to cause widespread hunger and starvation, this is now pushing people to the brink of famine. 90% face crisis levels of hunger. More than 80% of the global population suffering hunger right now are in Gaza. More may die from starvation and disease than the airstrikes do. Yet Israel continues to impede aid into Gaza, but is also removing the means to distribute it as well. On the 8th of January, a planned mission by UN agencies to deliver medical supplies and fuel to a medical supply centre was denied by Israeli authorities. 5 hospitals in northern Gaza are without supplies and equipment, and Israel is keeping it that way. Aid trucks are seized upon by the hungry, and what is supplied is not enough. Hassim's third point was that Israel has inflicted conditions denying access to adequate clothes, shelter and sanitation. Clean water is all but gone. Soaring rates of disease outbreaks continue. Diarrhea amongst under 5s has increased 2,000%, and it's a well-known fact that malnutrition and disease create a deadly cycle. And Hassim's fourth point on this aspect of Israel's actions was that the military assault on Gaza's healthcare system has rendered life unsustainable. Healthcare infrastructure in Gaza has been completely obliterated. The UN Special Rapporteur on Health has said the healthcare system in Gaza cannot cope with the scale of injuries. On Article 2d, Adila Hassim brought up another UN Special Rapporteur, the one for women and girls, who had warned about the reproductive violence inflicted on women, children and even newborn babies, intended to prevent births within the Gazan group. Israel have been blocking medical aid, including the kits needed to deliver babies. Women are giving birth in Gaza each day, and 15% are likely to experience complications where the care needed is simply not available. All these acts individually and collectively form a pattern of conduct by Israel of genocidal intent. By specifically targeting Gaza, using weaponry causing widespread destruction, designating safe zones and then bombing them, depriving Gazans of basic needs like food, water, healthcare, communication, sanitation, as well as destroying infrastructure like homes, schools, hospitals, churches and more, killing, seriously injuring and leaving many children orphaned. This is all a pattern of conduct and related intention justifying a plausible case of genocide. Hassim then brought up the example of the case of the Gambia against Myanmar on the basis of genocide, and the ICJ didn't hesitate to impose provisional measures in relation to accusations of genocide against the Rohingya in that instance. Every day there is mounting irreparable loss of life, dignity and infrastructure. Nothing will stop the suffering except an order from the court, because without an order the actions will continue, especially in light of Israel saying their actions will continue for at least a year. They've gone on record and said that. And that was the testimony of just the first lawyer. Making the case against Israel for genocidal intent came lawyer Tembeka Nkatobi. He said it was evident from how military attacks are being conducted, systematic, mass displacement, headed into areas where Gazans continue to be killed and deliberate conditions created by Israel to cause death. There is a clear pattern of conduct, the targeting of homes and infrastructure, laying waste to vast areas of Gaza, sniping of men, women and children, the lack of access to humanitarian assistance. 1% of the population of Gaza has now been killed. 1 in 4 have been injured since October 7th. All of this is evidence of genocidal intent in whole or part of the civilian population. But he brought up another extraordinary feature in this particular case as well, in that the political leaders and military commanders have declared their genocidal intent. These are repeated by soldiers on the ground, and is all rooted in the belief that, in fact, the enemy is not just the military wing of Hamas, or Hamas generally, but embedded in Palestinian life. Netanyahu has declared war on Gaza. He is quoted as having said on October 7th, Israel has started clearing out the communities that have been infiltrated by terrorists, and warned of a price to be paid. There are 2.3 million people in Gaza, and Israel is the occupying power in control of Gaza, everything that goes in and out, even down to the permitted internal movements of the people who live in Gaza. Netanyahu has overall control of the IDF, and in turn, therefore, the people of Gaza. On the 28th of October, Netanyahu urged the soldiers to remember what Amalek had done to them, the biblical reference to the wiping out of the Amalekites according to the Bible. Invocation to Amalek was repeated in a letter from Netanyahu later to his armed forces. Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, gave an update that there would be no electricity, no food, no water, because Israel is fighting human animals. He said that he has unleashed all restraints to eliminate everything. The theme of destruction of human animals, the language of dehumanization is here. This is a widely held view in Israel. Hamas and civilians are guilty in equal measure. Orders to destroy and maim what cannot be destroyed. These things were said by people in positions of authority in the Israeli state. These direct the actions and objectives of the people on the ground, the IDF, etc. Nkatobi then showed some video footage of Israeli soldiers singing and hugging and dancing in a circle. And the words they were singing were, "I'm coming to occupy Israel and beat Hezbollah. I stick by one mitzvah to wipe out the seed of Amalek. I left home behind me, won't come back until victory. We know our slogan, there are no uninvolved civilians." Echoing the words of Netanyahu, filmed dancing, chanting and singing. Now there is a trend for soldiers to film themselves committing atrocities. And more video footage was shown of one soldier filming themselves as they detonated 30 houses in one go. A whole skyline nearly of what were clearly homes blown up. And they ended their video by saying, "Long live Israel." Other reports stated that soldiers sang about destroying Khan Yunis. Israeli journalists have said the woman is an enemy, the baby is an enemy, the pregnant woman is an enemy, that it is necessary to turn the strip into a slaughterhouse, to demolish every house soldiers come across and exterminate everyone. Failure to control their media rhetoric is also genocidal intent on behalf of the Israeli government. A distinctive feature of this case is that it has not been silent on genocidal intent, but instead there has been reiteration and repetition of it. Nkatobi concluded by reminding the court of the genocidal inciters, the Prime Minister, the President, the Minister of Defence, the Minister of National Security, the Minister of Energy and Infrastructure, members of the Knesset itself, the Israeli Parliament, senior army officials and the foot soldiers as well. Genocidal rhetoric is not therefore in the fringes, but is in fact state policy. Therefore the evidence of genocidal intent is not only chilling, it is overwhelming and incontrovertible. Before I move on to the interim order South Africa is seeking a quick decision on, the case of genocide itself against Israel could take years to get to, I want to pick up on the testimony of one other lawyer, Bleni Nigrale, who spoke on the urgency of the situation. The situation in Gaza is described as a crisis of humanity, a bloodbath of unmatched horrors, denied access to the essentials for survival on an unimaginable scale. Gaza has become a place of death and despair, sleeping in the open as temperatures plummet. People relocated have come under bombardment, medical facilities have come under attack, and hospitals have been overwhelmed. There is a public health disaster unfolding. Infectious diseases are spreading as sewers spill over. The Gazan people are facing the highest levels of food insecurity ever recorded. Famine is around the corner. For children, this is particularly traumatic, with no food, no water, and no school. Bombing day in, day out. Gaza has become uninhabitable. Threats to a whole population's very existence, all happening as the world watches. The death toll is horrific. 7,000 remain missing, already dead, or dying slow, excruciating deaths, trapped under rubble, and decomposing bodies are left in the open where they were killed, some picked upon by animals. Entire towns, villages, and refugee camps are being wiped from the map, and 4 out of 5 people in famine in the world today are living in Gaza. Deaths from starvation outstripping deaths from bombings. 247 Palestinians are being killed and are at risk of being killed every day. Many literally being blown to pieces. 48 mothers are killed every day. 117 children are killed every day. UNICEF has called it a war on children. Each day, over 3 medics, 2 teachers, and more than 1 UN employee or journalist are killed each day. Risk of famine increases each day. 6,219 people will be wounded every day, moving from place to place, seeking sanctuary. Each day, 10 children will have one or both legs amputated, not necessarily with anaesthetic. And more homes will be destroyed. More cemeteries destroyed, more bodies desecrated. Ambulances, hospitals and medics will keep being attacked and killed. Those trying to rescue people buried will be killed, at least one every second day. Each day people will be forced to relocate from shelter, often where they have been told to move to, and more kids will become WCNSF. Wounded child, no surviving family. There is an urgent need for provisional measures to stop this. There could not be a more compelling case. There must be an end to the decimation of Gaza and its people. Condition of urgency is met for the act of causing an act of prejudice that can occur at any time. These can and are happening. Since South Africa's proceedings were initiated on the 29th of December, 1,703 Gazans have been killed and 3,252 have been injured. This is a besieged population trapped with nowhere to go. And the standout quote from Blini Nigrale's testimony was easily, "Look in the mirror and ask where was I when Gaza was going through a genocide. South Africa is here before this court in the Peace Palace." Now there are other testimonies by the other lawyers on South Africa's team which were fantastic too, on procedures, on rights to protection, on the measures that are required. But this video is already longer than usual for me. This is what they want the court to lay down and expeditely as soon as possible. It's a 9-point plan and it really is the basics, and I really can't see any argument from this, especially based on the brilliant way that these South African lawyers have laid out the case here. Measures requested as a matter of urgency. 1. The State of Israel must immediately suspend its military operations in Gaza. 2. Any organisations subject to their control, direction or influence cease and desist. 3. South Africa and Israel shall each take all measures to prevent genocide. 4. Israel shall under the Genocide Convention desist from the commission of all acts, including killing, causing bodily or mental harm, deliberately inflicting conditions of life intended to bring about their destruction, or imposing measures designed to prevent births in the group. 5. Israel shall in relation to Palestinians take all measures, including the rescinding of orders to prevent expulsion and forced displacement from homes, the deprivation of adequate food and water, access to humanitarian assistance, fuel, shelter, hygiene, sanitation, clothes and destruction of Palestinian life in Gaza. 6. Israel shall ensure its military and any irregular armed units or associated individuals or organisations do not commit any acts described above or direct public incitement to commit genocide or be complicit of inciting genocide. 7. Israel shall take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the preservation of evidence associated with their actions, therefore not restrict fact-finding missions or investigations to gather evidence. 8. Israel shall submit a report on all measures giving effect to this order within 1 week, and thereafter at such regular intervals as the court orders until a final ruling is made. And 9. Israel shall refrain from any action and ensure no action is taken to aggravate or make this situation more difficult to resolve. By referencing many other cases in their testimony which I've not brought up, South Africa has also laid out that if the court does not grant a provisional order, it will undermine international justice and means Israel will again be seen as having exceptions being made for it. This is the first genocide the world has ever seen where victims are able to broadcast their own destruction, thanks to the ability to stream events to tablets and mobile phones the world over. Palestine represents a moral failure, therefore, for the world to act when it was required to, as it was decades ago, frankly. And so it has come to this court here and now. The world should be horrified, it should be outraged that there is no safe space in Gaza, and the world should also be ashamed that it's taken this long and come this far. I will, of course, cover Israel's response to all of this tomorrow. Meanwhile, here's a video covering the possible outcome of South Africa winning their provisional order as laid out by a genocide legal expert. Definitely worth a watch if you're wondering what the point is to all of this at the end of the day. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next video. Cheers, folks.